Hello, everybody. Live from Salt Lake. I'm kind of ready for this episode and didn't know if I was going to be, but I'm at the Salt Lake City Reptile Show. We have tonight Glen Reptiles, old school keeper and breeder of many different species, but we'll have him tell us that himself. And we, of course, we have Dave, my friend Dave Levinson of Custom Scales, helping. And first, we're going to give a big shout out to USARK. Hold on, this banner thing is kind of fun. Where is it? I'm going to bring up USARK. There we go. USARK. Please support USARK. They fight for your and my right and everybody's rights that involved in herpetoculture for us to own these species that we love. We have Phil Goss, Daniel, Vanessa. There's a bunch of other people that do a really good job at supporting us for what we want to do. And that's for what they're doing is they're negating the imposed legislation that infringes on your and my right to own, these reptiles. And they do a really good job at mitigating these and streamlining this stuff. And, again, please support USARK. Donate if you can. Share their stuff. Follow USARK. And that's it. And then June 28th, I think, and 29th, I'm going to be there. You'd think I would know this by now. I will be at the show. It's Reptile Super Show. It's put on by Rami. It's an amazing expo. It's really good for networking and just hanging out, meeting breeders you like, meeting new breeders. I've made a lot of good friends out there. I'm very happy I started doing those shows, and now I'm doing more of them. Before, I'd only do the January one. I like them so much, and the people that I've met there so much that I now do the June one, and I'll probably be at Anaheim as well. And now let's bring on Dave and then Glenn. How's it going?
Going great.
Hey, guys.
All right, so I guess the first thing I wanted to ask Glenn, how long have you been keeping and breeding reptiles? Did you start out as a herper or did you start keeping right away? How long have you been at this?
Well, I mean, really about 25 years for being serious about it. When I was a little kid, I would catch some snakes and, keep them in an aquarium. And then when they'd escape, I would catch some more and put them back in there. So my mom never knew that they got out. And eventually our house had a variety of snakes floating around inside. And so I did that as a kid, and I got into aquariums growing up. And so I had a lot of aquariums, and then I just loved animals my whole life. So just kind of got different pets. And at one point I had some lizards, some geckos, and I decided to try a snake, and this was back many, many years ago. And so I traded a Pac-Man frog that was about the size of a dinner plate that was eating medium-sized rats. I traded that guy for a ball python, and I still remember I put my hand out, and like the pet shop owner put this ball of a snake on my hand, and my hand was shaking so badly because it was a snake. And so this was, probably my mid-20s, late 20s. That was my first real pet snake. I ended up breeding those guys. I had to find a pair, a female to breed with that one through the classifieds of the newspaper. You guys maybe don't know what that was, but
I didn't say.
Yeah, long before Craigslist. Craigslist was very modern compared to that. And so anyway, I ended up breeding those. I thought that was super cool. I held on to those snakes for about 15 years. And then I decided to pick up a couple of Nelson's Melks that were het albino, which was a big deal. And so I picked those guys up for a good price. And then I produced albinos. And then I started just trading. It's like, I've got these babies. I'm going to trade and pick up a couple of other things I'm interested in. I've got some other things I'm going to trade and pick up. And I just started accumulating animals I was interested in year after year after year. And 25 years later, I've got a wide variety of different types of animals. And one thing that I often say is I've previously owned pretty much everything, because if it doesn't work in my system, I've got a very small area that I keep everything in. So it has to kind of work with the way I'm working with the animals. And if it doesn't, I move it on. And so, yeah, so I kind of have moved through a variety of different animals over the years.
Well, that was what I was going to bring up, because I've always wanted a lot of diversity. I always tell people coming in, like, if your settings aren't perfect for everything, nothing is going to do well. So you got to find something that dials into what you have in that environment. So that was going to be one of my big questions. How did you settle on what you were working with when it came to environmental?
Well, I'll tell you, I do have a little bit of flexibility, and I'm the jury's out onto how successfully I can do this. I've actually had a little bit of trouble with my boas and pythons successfully breeding the last couple of years. I've bred them successfully off and on for the last 10 years. For the last couple of years, I've had some challenges, and I'm wondering if it's because I'm not able to give them what they want in a small room that has a bunch of colubrids that has what they want. And what I do is I have a room that I keep at about 72, 74 degrees. So the air conditioner is blowing basically all summer and all winter. And then I have heat on every single tub. And so based on what the animal is, some animals the heat's completely off. Some animals, the heat is set for, 98, 100 degrees. And so it's this constant battle in this very small room of all these tubs trying to stay hot enough and cool enough on the same end. And I'm not sure if I've done it successfully, but I've worked hard at trying to create an environment, things that need slightly different settings, can survive near each other. And then I do a variety of different things to affect humidity, from substrate to how much ventilation you have, to kind of adjust humidity, and then other things like hides and humid boxes and things like that. Big water bowls or small water bowls, all the different things that kind of help you specialize for a particular type of animal that you're keeping.
I see this one thing. I want to add it to stage, Glenn. It looks like it's their page with that looks like Therai Kings. Mostly, I see some corns.
Yeah, actually, I just put that up because I wanted to see if I was going to be able to share pictures. So if I talked about something,
okay,
I could go to it and say, "Hey, this is what I'm talking about." So then people could see that.
Yeah, okay. I didn't know what that was. I'm like, I'm gonna bring this up, and it's like, and so I should have asked about it before we went live because I seen it. I was like, oh, I wonder what these are, and I just didn't ask.
Yeah, so I didn't know. Yeah. So then I can control it over here, I guess. And yeah,
this is actually cool. We need to do more stuff like this, Dave.
So I got on early to try to figure out how I could do something like this to kind of, because I'll talk about something, and I was actually going to do this in my snake room, but it's too crowded in there, and I don't have a comfortable chair, and so I decided to do it here and try to make it so that we can share some pictures while we're at it. So yeah, I could share pictures all day. That's one of my favorite parts of the hobby.
What species is this?
What's that?
What species is it? It looks like an old world rat snake.
Yeah, it's a royal diadem rat snake. And these guys are, and here's where you begin to discover one of my many weaknesses, and that is, here we go. I am not a scientific name guy.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, don't touch it at all.
And so here's where these guys are, and they start. You can see they start kind of plain looking, and then they, as they mature, you saw the adults there. And these are it's a melanistic version.
Oh, that's pretty. Yeah, I want to see that enlarged. That's pretty cool. I like that.
Yeah, they're pretty wild. So that's the melanistic version. They get almost solid, or essentially a solid black.
It reminds me of like a black rat night snake hybrid. If you could hybridize a night snake with a black rat, kind of like that.
Yeah, isn't that wild? Yeah,
that's cool.
So yeah, you can see as we go down that the black splotches get darker on the normals, and the black on these guys gets black.
That's sweet. That's really cool.
But yeah, I just got a clutch of eggs. I got my first clutch of eggs from these guys about a month ago.
How many eggs?
I think I had about 6.
Okay.
So it was a reasonably small clutch. But they were big eggs, and I don't think there might have been 1 slug, but I'm not sure I even got 1 slug. So I was very happy for a first time breeding, and she's still growing into it. She's big enough to go. I have another female that's not big enough to go yet. She's a little slower on the uptake, but yeah, they're a fun snake. They have a personality that I've really grown to like, and that is, I am a snake holder. I love to hold my snakes, and that's actually one of the reasons why I get rid of snakes on occasion. Is I will go, I can't handle it. If it won't let me hold it, I'll get rid of it. If it's going to musk on me every time I pick it up, I'll get rid of it because I just like to interact with them. And actually, the nature of the way I keep the animals, I think it's important for them to have additional interaction. I don't have big enclosures for them to explore. And so I do think part of their, enrichment is to interact with me on a regular basis. And so we can talk more about that. I've got some thoughts about the
Yeah, that's a good topic. We never really covered on that one before. So
yeah. Well, one thing I noticed when I was looking at your collection is the fact you use the clear polycarbonate tubs. And I'm a big fan of that. I've got a lot of ARS racks I want to switch out to Colubrids, but I don't want to use the gray tubs at all. I prefer that clear tub.
Yeah, I think it's helpful. In my opinion, it's helpful for them to see the daylight and night. It's helpful for them to kind of process that. It's helpful for them to see movement around, so they're not always afraid. I think it just helps them adjust better. And then it also gives me opportunity to see them, especially the clear ones, the polycarbonate. I only have that for the ones that they make them for, which aren't all the sizes. But if they make them, I buy them for the sizes I can get. I just like that interaction. And I have several snakes, and these are one of them that will sit up and watch you. They'll check you out while you're in there, see what you're doing.
Oh, nice.
So that's good. So for this species, what is this kept like? Like, what are your hot spots? You keep in a rack with another more common Colubrid?
I keep it in with a normal Colubrid sort of brack. They have a cool, and one of the nice things about this is they have a cool end that's 72, and they have a hot end that's probably maybe 80, 82. So I don't want to get it too hot, or I want to have a range for them to go in. And for the most part, they will stay off the heat unless they've eaten, and then they stay off the heat. And so I keep them on, in my case, kiln dried pine bedding. And then I give them a humid hide box that isn't on the heat. And then water, and they seem to do pretty well. And they usually don't go in their hide much unless they're shedding.
Okay, so this sounds like a lot of old world rats. They don't like it really hot, so lower temps. And
yeah, I mean, I've got others I have Moellendorffi, and those guys are. I keep those guys off of any heat. They don't have access to any heat. And so they do well that way. So the truth is, some of the snakes they're not common enough that we have a lot of background information on them, and so I just kind of keep an eye on them. And if I've noticed that I'm looking at a snake that's always staying on the heat, I'll increase their heat.
you got those. Those are the 1,000 flower the rat snakes.
100 flower, yeah, 100 flower. And this is a hypo version. of it.
That's pretty cool. I've never seen that before. I don't think I've seen the 100 flower, just like just the wild types, I should say, just the wild types. I've never seen this.
Yeah.
No.
So yeah, there. Yeah. Here's a pair hanging out.
Yeah, big heads. And now you said if you have a snake that's musk and it's not the best at being handled, you don't really want to work with it. So I'm guessing you have 0 Honduran milk snakes.
That is correct. Yes.
Well,
You know, I love the color of Hondurans, and I have been fascinated by like the extreme hypo in particular, and I love the tricolors. And so I have made runs. I bought a 3 or 4 a small group of Hondurans. I bet 4 times where I buy them. And I'm like, I'm going to work with these, or I'm going to get, and I, for a variety of reasons at the end. And usually it's because I basically only feed frozen thawed. So that's another thing that causes something to kick out of my collection. If I can't get it to switch over to frozen thawed, I usually will not keep it for that long. Although I've kept stuff for multiple years that way, but eventually it's too much extra work for me.
It makes sense. Yeah, you got the convenience of having it. I breed some mice to have on hand because I have so many hognoses and some for fur live with small percent. And it is nice. Well, for a while it was like a big pain. It still kind of is to have the mice. But the thing is, the cost of mice, it's like, man, it's not worth breeding them. But now as the cost of mice going up, I'm like, wow, it's kind of partially worth breeding them.
Yeah. I have much of my decision making is based on a extreme lack of space. And so I did at one point to make a very small 3-tub rack for mice, just so I'd have pinkies available for temperamental feeders. And it didn't work to keep it in my small space. The snakes were always aggressive because they always smelled food. So like my snakes are not aggressive at all. But when I start feeding, you'll see them all come to the front of the tub. And when you open it, they come jumping out with their mouth open, this time of year anyway. And so if I have not fed and there's no food smell in the room, they're not aggressive like that. And so I don't have a place to do that other than in that room. And so I ended up just giving up on the idea of trying to breed my own mice.
Yeah, I've had an experience too. I used to breed. I still breed some rats, but I had rats in my snake room for a bit. In those old, they're those. They got the metal screen top. They're like the lab breeding tub.
Yeah, the lab ones. Yeah.
And I had it near my Brazilian rainbow boas, and the female was like, they definitely probably helped that is near there, but she never escaped. But she was able to push out. And when I entered the room, you ever see like those old paintings of like a gigantic squid subduing a ship? That's what she looked like, wrapped around.
All the different
ones. She's a big one. She's a big one I had from Norm Dams, this big old Brazilian rainbow. She's like 6.5 foot, and she was coiled around the entire the breeding tub, the rats, and then trying to get into it, wrapped like she was constricted and trying to get into it. And the rats were all petrified, kind of in the corner, just rushing around.
Yeah.
That's funny.
It did make it easier to find escaped little, small snakes. They would always find their way in there, and they could fit in, but they couldn't fit out.
True.
Once they got in there and ate 2-3 mice, they couldn't get back out. So for any kind of escaped babies, it was a good trap.
Yeah, that's a good actually tip for people that have escaped snakes. I think it'd work better on like most colubrids, like especially like Palmettos and like actually these old world rats. If you have like a dirty like mouse bedding tub and you put it somewhere, they're going to go towards it. Hognose eggs, like I deal with those, so sometimes people have those get loose. I was like, it'd probably work for the good feeders, but I feel like they're kind of quirky snakes and they might not even give a crap and just still go wherever. But yeah, I definitely, because I had a Mexican black king get loose, did the same thing, went to an old mouse breeder tub.
Yeah.
What well, you said so this is a room temperature species?
Yes. Let me say, I don't know anything about anything, first of all, so I don't need everybody to tell me how wrong I am about stuff. I mean, I'm happy for people to tell me I'm wrong if I'm wrong, because I'd love to get better at it. So I give answers a lot. My answer is what I'm doing, not necessarily what is kind of the authority on the subject. And sometimes, well, usually I look to see what people who have kept animals successfully are doing. But lots of times I'll go against that because the animals aren't behaving in a way that I think is in their best interest. You know, if somebody says to keep it this way and it will never go back on the heat, I think it's too hot.
Yeah.
And so I just keep an eye on my animals. And so sometimes I will adjust it based on that. But yeah, I was told these guys are room temperature. In fact, they're not only room temperature, they're room temperature on the bottom of my racks, which is about, 8 degrees cooler than the top of my racks, room temperature.
Well, what you're doing is good. That's
yeah.
sorry, Dave, but that's what I've always said. It's like my hognose, and it applies to all species. Like they communicate with you based on their behavior. Like you're saying, if they're on the heat all the time, or let's say they're not eating as much and they're always on the heat, or they're always towards the warm side, yeah, they need to be kept warmer. There's certain species, like mandarin rats and like some of those bamboo rats, they don't like a lot of heat. They like it cool. So anybody that's kept them around like 88, 90 degrees and they died, that's a really rough form of communication, but the snake just told you overheated and fucking killed you. Same with Brazilian. That's why I talked to Dave about it. Like, I bred Brazilian rainbows for a while. It was like one of my least favorite species. Actually, it is my least favorite species to sell people, because 50% of the time, people, I would tell them, like, hey, you can't get these things hot, and they're not the best beginner snake. The funny thing is, they're actually easy to keep. You just want to keep, like, if you keep a like moist like environment, or like on cypress mulch, you have a big water bowl there, you don't need a lot of heat on them. I keep them in my basement reptile room floor when I lived at my dad's place when I was younger. I'd feed my adult male Brazilian rainbow, and it would be like 72 degrees, and the thing would digest a medium rat, no problem.
Oh, wow.
And there's like the same with like blood pythons, and I'd say a lot of other species. They had this connotation early on in the hobby in the 90s and early 2000s. It seemed like that all these species like it hot and humid. Like, oh, it's come from like a more tropical environment. It likes it hot and humid. And, a lot of these are more forest-dwelling snakes, or they're on the forest floor, and they're in the cooler areas, and they'll bask when they want heat. And it depends on the species. But, like, yeah, you're saying just the snakes will communicate with you. And if they're, like, always hanging out in their water bowl, maybe the snake needs more moisture. So basically paying attention to that stuff is really key. And that's how you can actually learn things. And you can unlearn things that are just done because everybody else is doing it. It's like, like when I started, is like, this is a Colubrid. So whether it's a hognose snake or a Brooks King or a corn snake, you just kept them all identical. You put them in a rack with a 32-quart tub. There's a water bowl, a hide, and the hot spot was 88 or 90 degrees, and there's aspen bedding, and that's all you did.
Yeah.
And then the cool side was like 70s, and yeah, it doesn't. It's not. Obviously, there's ways to improve on this stuff.
Yeah. I always try to look at where they originate, what's the altitude, what's the humidity, what's the temperature at different times of the year, and just how prolific they are in the wild. I only have one animal out of all my animals. I have one animal that's wild caught, and it's a local rubber boa that I have for my grandchildren to play with. It's the only snake they're allowed to open the tub for if I'm not there opening the tub. And so it's a very popular one, but all of my snakes have never seen the wild. And so they obviously have a different experience than animals in the wild, but still they're certainly programmed to have, to need a certain amount of humidity and heat and various things. And I think by looking at where the species comes from, it helps us get at least some parameters.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, not only the captive care, you're going to learn for them communicating to you, like, with their behavior, but also, yeah, look where they're coming from, look where they're actually being found. Makes a lot of sense.
I tried waking my corn snakes up a little early this year, and the building that I moved them into was 78 degrees. and the hotspot was on 82 in the back of the rack. They refused to touch the back of the rack. They refused to wake up early. They all just pushed up. I think they stayed that way for about the first month and a half.
Interesting. Yeah, they do their thing. Yep. Yeah, I do think it's interesting because I've talked to people who breed like off cycle of, and I think many of them are in Florida, so everything's. I mean, it's always the same temperature, is what they told me, and so they have to adjust it. You know, they have to cool them down artificially, and then. But I do think it's interesting. My animals do not budge very well from the yearly cycle. And I do a few things to try to move them along one way or another. I think it's helpful to not have all your eggs coming at in the same week. It's nice to have that spread out. You get eggs that are spread out, and you get babies that are spread out, so you're not having to spend hours and hours and hours trying to get all of them feeding at the same time, all of them in tubs at the same time. And because I have a variety, they are a bit like clockwork into the time of year that they will breed and lay. And I'm sure you guys are familiar with that idea. My corn snakes and my bull snakes are some of the earliest to lay, and then my gopher snakes, San Diego gophers, are some of the last to lay in the season. And I can count on that every year.
Yeah. And Glenn, there's one interesting thing, and I know Dave was talking about too. He wanted to bring this one up, and Dave, you might have more questions about the zombie gopher snake morph.
Yeah. I don't know if you guys know the controversy of the zombie. Do you?
I looked up pictures, and it's amazing. Like, I keep saying zombie snows, and it basically looks like this ultra high colored snow with a lot of like lavender and blue hues and like some really intense like lemon yellows coming through.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about the zombie, and then I'll talk about the controversy. So, yeah, these are San Diego gophers. This is what I would consider. Let's see if I can get there. So, this is what I would call a zombie snow stripe zombie snow. Now, interestingly, I've always called this an envy snow zombie phase, but admittedly, sometimes when I'm talking about it, I might just say zombie snow as an abbreviation. But whenever I've written about it or made claims about it, I've always talked about it being an envy snow, which is the trade name for E positive. And I said it just looks different. And I can show you some, like, yeah, here's an envy snow as well. That looks pretty different, doesn't it?
Yeah, that almost has a more of a T-neg look. And then the ones you're showing are like T-paz.
Yeah, and so the way I described, actually, the way it got its name is when I looked in the tub the first time and it had come out of the egg, I thought it was dead. I thought it was a dead snake that had come out and died and had started, you know how when they rot, they kind of turn purple? That kind of rotting purple look. That's what he looks like as a baby. He looked like he was rotting. Here's kind of an image that represents that. Yeah. And so I was like, and then when I picked him up to throw him away, he moved. And so I just kind of stuck with, I was like, he's like a zombie. And so it's just a way of me referring to this kind of look. And so you can see the one I just showed you. Now here's another. This is again an envy snow. This is a normal envy snow right here. And you can see that if I'm gonna, and here's the thing, when I describe it, the point is, here's my explanation, so that might be helpful. So this is what I would describe as 4 types of envy snows. You've got your striped envy snow, which is this. You've got your normal envy snow at the top. You can see that's a snow. But on the right, you see that zombie phase, which another way of saying it's just kind of an extreme T positive look, dark T positive. And then you can also get an envy snow that has a T negative mixed in with it, which is Bechtel. So that's kind of how I don't know that I've named. I guess I've called it a zombie phase. Everything else is not original with me. In San Diego Gophers, the T positive has both dyers, clumpers, and super hypo are all compatible. They're all compatible T positive albinos. And so that has caused a lot of confusion about what anything is. And so
not to cut you off, but do you think there's 3 types of allelic T posinos? Do you think they all look the same, or is there ones that have a distinct different look?
Oh, they look very different.
All 3 do. That's very cool and interesting.
Yeah, super high, and we Jason Nelson believes that they all came from Jack Dyer's stock, and that people just bred them to look differently. The people who produced them, the others, would beg to differ, and they have arguments that they never had any of Jack Dyer's stock, and so I don't care to get into that. I don't know anything about it, nor do I care. I do know that Dyer's has like a pretty brightly colored. So we're looking at snows, but if you look at just the albinos, Dyer's have a pretty bright coloration, very colorful, but they're very light when it comes to their the part that's dark on those T positives. So let me show you this. This would probably be described as a Dyer's. So you can see how pretty it is. Very bright animal, but it's not very dark here. Clumpers are similar, and I found that many of the clumpers are not quite as bright, but here's a clumper stripe, just to give you an idea. So this is striped, but it's got the clumpers. And you can see how dark that line is there, those lines are. As a pair for a clumpers. Now the super hypos came from Stoughton out of Europe, and those are I didn't think they were going to be compatible. They were so unique looking, and so they're very brightly colored and really dark. I mean, they're the average one is about as dark as any that I've ever. My clumpers that I produced. And so they're really beautiful animals. But all 3 of them are compatible. And the problem is, when Jason, well, let me give you the background. I woke up on vacation with my family about Thanksgiving time, and I saw, there's somebody mentioned me in a YouTube video. And so I go there, and it's basically Jason and the guy who does his YouTube thing complaining about me trying to steal the name of the Envy Snow by renaming it Zombie.
Sounds like they're envious.
Yeah, Envy. So they don't have it. They don't have it. And so anyway, that really bothered me, partly because I do consider Jason a friend. He's never once said to me, hey, it bugs me that you call it that. And they publicly kind of not only said I did things I didn't do, which is they said that I was claiming to have created a new morph, when in reality I clearly consistently said I have this particular look of this morph is different, and so I call them zombies. I didn't say they are zombies. I said I call them zombies. Now the problem is it was such a catchy name and such a cool looking snake that everybody else started calling them zombies, and that pissed Jason off.
Well, I like the name. I like the history of the name because you actually have a cool backstory to it.
Yeah.
Not just like, zombie sounds cool. It's like, I thought the snake was dead, and that's how the name. So I really like how that came about. And the controversy, it made me smile. I kept letting you go. I was really eager I wanted to say something because I'm like, oh, you're like, I don't really care to get too much into it because there's a lot of I was like, this is actually kind of fun. Yeah. You have these 3 phenotypes. They're all from different places. There's all this like kind of like arguing of where they started from, where they stem from. They have different looks. One's drastically different, but yet they're compatible. It's pretty interesting, and they're very, very pretty. These snakes are shown, especially the adults. These bright lemon yellows and these lavender, and the stripes on the neck area. Seems like there's the most concentration of melanin there. And the funny thing is, I wonder, the thing is, there's like Tremper albino leopard geckos. They are T positive, and the temperature they're incubated at that dictates like how much melanin they produce. And sometimes other genes you put into them can dictate how much melanin they produce. And it's like Siamese cats. Siamese cats are actually a form of T positive, and they have all the dark pigment in the extremities where they need most of their warmth. So their face, their ears, and their paws, and that's why there's more melanin there. And so the funny thing is, I'm wondering if gopher snakes need more of their melanin in the upper portion of their body, their neck, and that's why you're getting strong concentrations of melanin in this upper neck area.
Yeah, it's definitely up there. Sorry, David.
We were talking about this past weekend. Do you know Matt Bowers? He's a Georgia guy. I think he might have got some stuff from me in the past, but we were looking at a lot of the black rat. We were looking at like the black rat snakes in Missouri are just blacker, like no pattern whatsoever. The belly's going to be gray with some or white with some gray spots, but jet black animal. Our coach whips. Extremely black, almost head to tail. And the discussion was why in this area. And I find that some species, when it's like longer winters, they just try to get a little bit of that coil out to get as much heat out of them as possible to warm their entire body. So I think that's why a lot of the Missouri species have more darker pigment. So depending on these guys and their temperature changes, that could be so they could stick their head out, and that more melanin they have in the upper torso will actually heat the rest of their body.
But in this case, I don't think that applies in this case. And let me tell you why. It's not an issue of melon because it's a form of albinism, and so it's a T positive. So they all have the same amount. If it was a T negative, it'd just be very white. And so I think more melon doesn't affect the degree of its darkness, if you will, because it's this T positive factor. And so you can have a T positive that expresses a lot or expresses a little, but if you got a normal in those snakes, they'd all be the same.
I understand that. Yeah, it is really crazy on T positive because when you look at the normal phase, the melon almost seems pretty consistent. It does light it a little bit good on the body, but not to the point you think you lose it all completely.
Yeah, it's interesting. Are you familiar with the what are they called? Dalmatian, calico, black rats?
I'd be lying to you. I know a lot of the mutations, but I don't think I've ever heard of that one.
Okay, so I don't have the guy's name on the top of my head, but a guy took the calico black rats and he took very black rats and bred them into them to try to get more of a black speckled without as much of the coloration as I understand it. And so let me show you. I picked up some of those. I think I have them in here. I picked some up at Daytona this last year, and it was kind of fun. They're a neat snake.
Well, I love the Calico project. I think that's pretty interesting, and the guy putting darker pigment in is a pretty unique concept.
Yeah, so these guys, they're very young at this point.
Yeah.
But the idea is that they're going to turn black and white.
Interesting.
But yeah, they're a fun snake.
No, I've got a favorite in different species. So the envy snow gopher or the zombie envy snow, like that's one of my favorites for gophers. For any kind of rat snake, the calico is probably my favorite rat snake mutation as an adult. I kind of want to pick certain things from every species I really like.
I get it. So have you checked out are you familiar with the rusticos? I think is what people are calling them now.
I don't think I've seen this one.
This is a black rat that is het leucistic, which would make it a rusty, I believe, of the way we call them. So it's het leucistic and it is het calico. So het both of those things, and that's what it turns out looking like.
Huh. Well,
so it's very, it's a fascinating combination of those two het genes showing a visible outcome.
Has anybody bred visual leucistic to visual calico to see if everything came out looking that way?
My understanding is if you breed a visual leucistic to a visual calico, 100% will come out looking like this.
Okay. I wonder if that's something allelic happening there, because it looks like it's another blue-eyed leucistic.
I would think it would have to be some sort of two hets sitting on the same allele.
Yeah.
But it's a pretty interesting little thing, and to me, it was very shocking that it wasn't better known, considering how well known Lucy's and calicos are.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, honestly, if you think about it, why put two things together that might just cancel out the best thing about the calico? So I would have been a little reluctant to putting that pairing together in my collection.
Oh, yeah, that makes
somebody
sense.
just put some heads together by chance, and they made that outcome, it would change everything.
Yeah. So anyway, I've got a few things going with these guys. They're kind of fun. Part of why I picked them up is because these are pretty well known on the East Coast, and everybody's familiar with these guys. But out here on the West Coast, you don't see very many of these at any of the shows.
No, I've had a few wholesale lists for some of East Coast guys, and these have been on there for years. They've gone up a little bit over the last couple of years. I think over the last 5 years, they've jumped up in price. They kind of dropped down for a while there, but I don't know. I see a lot of people buying this kind of stuff now. I like the larger colubrids. I like a lot of the North American colubrids, and that's an awesome mutation.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
Now, is that the only rat snake projects you're doing, or as in like black rats?
Yeah, I've actually got some lemons that are mixed into this equation as well, and so I'm playing with those as well. So most of this stuff is pretty new, pretty young. I've had them a couple of years, some of them only a year, and so I'm kind of breeding them up and going to figure out what I want to do with them moving forward. And again, I don't keep a ton of anything. I generally, of anything I have, if I have 8 or 10 of something, that's a lot. A lot of my animals, I only have a pair or a trio or 2 pair. And again, I do what you just described, and that is I like this type, and so I try to stay in my lane.
Yeah, no, that's really the way I've always been. And like you said, there's a lot of these different colubrid projects that can be kept at similar settings, so you could have a really diverse colubrid collection. My problem in the past, I'm a big blue tongue skink guy, so I've got like 80 blue tongue skinks. I don't necessarily need 80 blue tongue skinks, but I've been working with them for 12 years, and I have 80 of them. Same thing with boa constrictors. My boa constrictor group is probably around 100. Really needs to be like 50, and even that's pushing it.
Right.
So I'm really trying to downsize a lot of things to kind of like what you've done, get a little bit of everything that has always caught my eye. I'd rather have variety than be stuck in mutations within one species.
Right. Well, I get why people are attracted to certain things, and there are times when I'm like, boy, I'd really love to focus. And the advantage of focusing on something that you're doing well with is you know how to do it. You've got the right environment for it, and so when you start mixing up different animals, different species in the same rack, in the same room, you now are throwing in a lot of variables that maybe affect your success. Whereas if they're all the same kind of animal, they all do really well in it, with the system that you've got working. So I get the attraction of that, and I get the attraction of wanting to take something you have and make something new out of what you have. I get those attractions, and I do a little bit of that with a few species, but for the most part, I get what I like and I reproduce it.
That's understandable. And, it's funny because you mentioned, you're having a little bit of a struggle with your boas. The cloud boa, the cloud forest boa, honestly, was always one of my favorite growing up because you saw it in all the boa books and it was like one of the more unique looking wild types.
Yeah.
And honestly, outside of like Vin Russo and like one or two other people, you just don't see these anymore. Like they completely fell off the map.
Yeah. It's funny. Here is my success picture here.
Very cool.
Those are the smallest boa in the world, aren't they? Or sorry, of the boa constrictors. Not the smallest boa. Obviously, they're smaller
right.
boas.
I don't think they're the smallest, but they are among the smallest.
Okay.
From my research. But it's funny you should mention this because literally 3 hours ago, my girl dropped about 18 slugs and 5 babies.
Yeah. Well, that's boa breeding. I think at one point this year I had 5 slug. No, I think I had like 4 or 5 slug outs with 2 good litters, and then all of a sudden I was at 8 good litters and 5 slug outs. But no, good years, bad years. But no, those are beautiful. Like I said, you just don't see them anymore. They were in all the old boa books.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, it's a great snake. They're beautiful. They've got great temperaments. Yeah, just beautiful snakes.
Yeah. And you keep those in what, like a CB70?
No, the one that's wider than the CV70, I think it's a 90.
I think it's a 90, yes.
Freedom Breeder 90. So it's higher. It's higher and half again as wide.
Does it have the window on the front?
It's the kind that does have the window, but I got rid of those tubs. I had the tubs that had the windows. But they're a pain to wash because the windows always fall out for the Freedom Breeders, which is the kind I have. Yeah. The windows fall out, so you got to clean the windows separately, and things get caught in the cracks. And it was just so much easier to clean a solid tub that I replaced it with these tubs that you see in this picture, that just the normal sort of translucent tub. But I love the windows. It just was a pain to work with.
No, I know use that.
ARS has windows in this type of tub. I think it's this tub or their 70s, but they have windows that don't remove, that are smooth. And I do like that idea. Just it's expensive to always be buying new tubs every time you think you like one better.
Yeah, right. Every few years. That's I have to replace all my baby hognose racks. I'm getting rid of the V15. I love the style size tub. I love the rack, but there's issues with it. The Vision racks. I'm replacing them all with the polycarbonate mini series ARS racks for my baby hognose. So you let them more light. They're a little smoother when they close. The hognose can't open them as of yet. I've not had a hognose open up a mini series. I've had them open up D15s. The funny thing is, once they learn how to open them, they'll go back and sometimes they'll open them within hours. They know how to get them open.
They've got the system, huh?
Yeah. I have to put these large dice in front of them so that they can't do it. And the Visions, they also have issues with the holes back in the top of the rack, so they can put their face up there. You gotta be careful opening the closure on some of the babies. And you keep tricolor hognose, don't you, Glenn?
I do, yeah. I was a tricolor hognose breeder back years and years in the, what was it? Would have been about 2001. And not too many people had them back then. And so a handful of us were breeding them. We didn't know what we were doing. But as you know, we discovered, like everyone else discovered, boy, they sure like to breed, and they sure like to eat. I think I made a lot of mistakes with them because I didn't know what to do with them. But I've recently gotten back into it, partly just for fun is probably the right way to describe it. But yeah, these guys are beautiful snakes. They're fun to work with. And I've picked up a few tips from some successful breeders that I think are pretty helpful. And I'll let you in on, well, you probably know them, but I'll let some of your listeners in on the secrets that kind of work for me anyway. And that is, I keep them in a mixture of peat moss and sand, play sand. And so they will burrow in that peat moss and sand, and that will allow them to absorb moisture. And my experience with them is when I had trouble with them, it's because they were dehydrating and I couldn't get them to drink enough. And so I keep them in not wet, but moist peat sand. It's messy, but man, do they thrive in it. They seem to do great in it. And so one of the things I did was working with the babies is getting the babies to eat was a bit of a challenge. And I realized it was because they were all dehydrated. They didn't want to eat. And so what I started trying to do was I took a tub and put them actually back in the incubator in a tub with about an inch of that bedding that I just talked about. And they'll all burrow to the bottom. And then once a week, I would chop up Pinky to little pieces. And then I would put those pieces on a piece of paper and put it on top of that bedding. And the next morning, it'd be gone. And so I'd do that like once a week. And then after about 6 weeks, I'd dig through that stuff and pull out all the big snakes because they're eating. And then those guys would eat. They would eat pinky heads or full small pinkies at that point. And then I would feed the ones that weren't as big yet. And in doing that, I've had almost no rejections on eating. And that means they never tasted anything other than a pinky their whole life.
And so you communally kept the babies together too while doing that. Cool.
Yes.
It makes sense, yeah, because with plains hognose snakes, while these are completely different genuses and they're completely different, one's from North America, one's from South America. But the thing is, they're both semi-burrowing snakes that live in loamy soil environments, and they're burrowing down in that loamy soil. And even if it's dry out, say where they're from in Uruguay, Paraguay, and northern Argentina, you might go there, it could be dry, but the soil always has a degree of moisture in it. So that's with hognose snakes. It's I tell people because there's something that they get a lot in the winter months. I call it dry nose. And they'll actually get chapped scales, and you'll see the chapped scales happen around their face. And the thing is, they're always burrowing with their face. They're going through moist soil, and usually it's hydrated when they're sitting in moist soil. So they're actually getting chapped scales, and you'll see it sometimes in the belly. Sometimes it'll look like it'll be like lifted up scales, or it's they're starting to lift up, or it's sharp and jagged, or like almost like a damaged look. And then a lot of times the plains hognose, you'll see it it'll even look like frosted. It'll look like it's just dry around their nose. And sometimes there'll be stuff stuck in their nasal cavity. And it's just because, it's just too a dry and dusty of an environment. And you can mitigate that by either spraying them, or I tell a lot of people, just put a humid hide in there. And I do the similar. You could use peat moss like you do, sphagnum moss. And I use coco coir mixed with sand. And basically I'm just replicating loam because it's one of those things too. You take from, what do they do in the wild? It's they're burrowing down in this moist substrate, and where they live in loamy substrate. Loam consists of topsoil, sand, silt, and clay. Now we don't need all that, just a little bit of sand and moist soil, topsoil like substrate. You can use topsoil that's clean, or peat moss or coco coir mixed with a little bit of sand, and you get that same effect.
Yeah, absolutely, I agree.
So that's pretty cool though. Go ahead. Yeah, tell us more about the tricolors.
Oh, I had a quick question. Junior, you brought up that with breeding these, I think we talked in the past that when a female gets laying, sometimes it's hard to get her to stop, to where I've heard of people losing females in breeding season.
I don't have much experience with tricolors. Glenn will be able to tell you. But I know I have had a lot of people tell me that they have 4 or 5 clutches a year. And then there was this one guy, a mutual friend. He's like, man, I had this tricolor female. He goes, man, I love those things. He goes, this thing just kept laying eggs until she died. He goes, she just kept laying eggs every couple of months. And he goes, and she just after 3 years of doing it, just died. He's every 3 months, she was laying eggs every 2-3 months.
Yeah, I have a similar story to that. Back in the days when it was really rare to have them, I had a pair, and they were breeding. They were literally laying eggs every 6 weeks.
Oh my goodness!
And I was like, how do I stop it? Because I can't be good to lay eggs every 6 weeks. And so while trying to process that, my male died. And I'm like, well, problem solved. It shouldn't be the male's dead, so she's going to stop. And she laid, I think, 5 or 6 clutches after that, within 6 to 8 weeks every time. And
Wow.
there was slightly diminishing fertility rates as the time went on. But even the final one probably had a 70% fertility rate.
Oh, wow. I was expecting way less. That's pretty interesting.
It was crazy. And so one of the things I learned about her was, because I got worried about her, snake lays that often. How are they going to keep weight on? And so I actually have pictures of her eating while they're breeding. So they're breeding and I'm trying to feed, but they were always breeding. So I'm like, well, maybe she'll eat. She's eating while he's breeding on her. And I got her way too fat because I was so afraid of her losing weight. And I think that's what eventually brought about her early demise. And I think I just had some different expectations on how to treat them that I've lightened up on. I was also reasonably young. I mean, I didn't have a ton of experience at that point, probably about, 5 or 6 years of breeding a few different types of things. And so, I got her way too fat. And I think that eventually she couldn't take that. I thought it was being successful because she was breeding. But sometimes that's not always the ultimate test.
Was the breeding female tricolor? I don't know how much there's like info out there, but it seems like the majority of these females that do breed a lot never really live long regardless, though. Seems like they're like 5, 6 years, like a lot of times max is what I'm hearing from a lot of tricolor people. I'm not sure how true that is. Again, I had tricolors once for a little bit, but I've never actually bred them. I kept them for about a year.
Yeah, my thought on that is they are short-lived, but a lot of snakes are short-lived. A lot of snakes that breed and produce like these guys do are short-lived. That's their whole system. And I think of them like garter snakes. Garter snakes are very short-lived as well. And so, from my understanding, I'll say. And so I do think if kept well, I would guess they could go, 7 to 12 years, something like that. And I do think that if not kept properly and constantly struggling with having proper moisture requirements, I think that shortens their life. I think they will eat aggressively and burst themselves. I think if overfed, it shortens their life, and it's very easy to overfeed these guys. I think there's a few different things that might impact that, but they're fun little curious snakes. They're pretty different than most snakes kept in the hobby. Even pretty different than Western hogs as far as just kind of messing with them. And so they're kind of a fun little side thing that you it's fun for me because I don't keep them the same as the way as I keep most of everything else.
Are you keeping males and females separate? Or are you keeping them together?
Well, here's the thing. Again, I do a lot of stuff that I don't say people ought to do. But what I happen to have a 1.3 colony of them that I keep in that state that I told you, where they've got the bedding and they just live in there. I'll pull them out, I'll feed them and make sure they're done eating, because once they start eating, they want to bite everything and eat everything. And so you can't put them back in right away or they'll bite each other. But once they've calmed down from eating, I'll put them back in. And quite literally, I just wait for them to lay eggs in that substrate, and I pull them out and put them in an incubator. And there are 3 of them, 3 females going around there laying eggs. And am in a constant revolving clutches of tricolored hog eggs.
Have you ever caught them eating their own eggs? Has that ever happened with these guys?
No, I did. I was concerned about that because I've heard that's common with westerns.
With Nassicus, yeah, Nassicus, it's a problem sometimes.
Yeah, so I that was one of the things I thought about when I had them together, because my plan was to pull them out when they were ready to lay and just have them lay in a separate thing, and then even keep an eye on that. But the truth is, I check on them essentially every day, and I have yet to notice. I mean, the clutches seem full. I don't see like, oh, there were only 3 eggs in this clutch, meaning they ate 8 of them, or 5.
And then like a lump in the female stomach.
Right,
Like, oh,
yeah.
I didn't feed you recently. But
Yeah.
like, since you're communally keeping them, and then you're doing it, so I'm like, okay, this gives them more of an opportunity to do that. And
Yeah.
I'm like, and the thing is, there's not a lot known about like xenodon in the wild. Like, are they, they're mostly like amphibian and lizard feeders, but with their rostral scaly, like they might dig up lizard, eggs and eat them too.
Right.
So, sometimes these reptile egg-eating species, like Western hognose, they are of course known to, like, it's not the majority, but enough of them for us to notice to be enough worry, especially when you got a really good clutch coming. Like, I already had one female eat half her clutch this year. I've got like a decent amount of clutches. It's not super common. It's more common the more hungry they are and the less you check them. So that's one thing.
Right.
Like and also still on the topic of kind of like the hognose world, do you keep Western hognose?
Sort of, not well. I don't keep them well. I bought some hognose. Again, they're just so cute and fun.
They are.
Snakes. And so I'm like, I do a lot of children's programs and stuff. And so I try to have some interesting things to show that are different. And hognose are obviously a big favorite. And so I do have some hognose. I'll show them to you because I think they're beautiful, but I don't really know what I'm doing. And I've had trouble getting them to eat really well and consistently, but I'm starting to crack the code recently.
The one thing I like to do is I like to smash the mouse's face and dip it in water and hold it right up against their mouth, let them drink from it. A lot of times that gets them.
That's the technique that is working for me right now the best. Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
So you have a super Arctic anaconda there with a lot of pink in it, by the way. That's a very pretty one.
Yeah. Well, both of these caught my attention, partly because of how pink they were, and they're just very pretty snakes. And so I ended up buying this pair just to have a pair. I hoped they would keep enough of a value to make it worth my while. So they're really pretty snakes, and I've enjoyed keeping them. I ended up picking up an albino. Let's see if it'll pop up here in a second. Yeah. So I bought an albino at Daytona, this albino female, and brought it home. And then I was like, wait a minute, that's not a female.
Yeah, I can see its tail. It's a male. It's a conda too. It's albino conda.
Yeah, an albino conda. Yeah, so I was thinking I'd throw her with that other male, and we'll see how it goes. But anyway, I'm not very good at it, but they're cute little guys. And this guy's got a hissy attitude, and he will never give it up. But he's not a problem. He just hisses a lot and jerks his head around.
Yeah. When they're like that, it's like, they're definitely they're not gonna bite you because all those bites are feeding responses. But yeah, sometimes it can startle, especially if you're showing like the kid to handle it and this hognose is hissing or thrashing. But generally those defensive ones, and I don't know if you've noticed with that one, but most of the time when they're like that, as soon as you pick them up with about 5-10 seconds, they're completely calm and they're okay to handle.
Yeah, in fact, one of the things that I've done is in some of the shows, I want to show the kids a snake hissing so they kind of get a sense of what it is. They get to see it. And so I don't have very many snakes that are aggressive enough to do that. And so I have a couple of like baby bull snakes. Most of my bull snakes are just so tame, even as babies, hatchlings. But a couple of them sometimes come out and they just have a real attitude. And so sometimes I'll bring one of those along. sometimes this guy will do enough of a show, that albino hognose, he'll do a hiss and kids will get a big kick out of that. Sounds scary to them. But then I'll show him, I can pick him up. He's not, see, that hiss is, there's no danger there. And so we kind of help them work through a fear that I believe is taught by their parents and our culture about snakes. And so I try to get them to see, I just think every person that sees us holding a cute little snake and not being afraid of it and not biting us and it being calm goes, oh, wait a minute. Now I think of snakes a little differently than I did before. Because people are so used to thinking every snake is venomous, every snake wants to kill me. And by kind of just seeing that interaction, I think it helps to lower their defenses on that. But along those lines, I do also teach kids in our area, there's only one venomous snake. It's highly recognizable. It's a rattlesnake. And so I said, so I often ask them, so if you see a snake and it doesn't have a rattle, is it okay to pick it up? And they go, yes. I go, no, don't pick it up because it's going to poop on you and it's going to bite you. Just enjoy it where it is. The only snakes you should be handling are snakes that are pets. And so I know that kind of goes against kind of a herp thing, but for the average person who's out there looking at a snake, picking up a snake leads to bad consequences, even when it's not venomous. Usually for the snake, but it comes with bad consequences. They either get pooped on or the snake bites them, and then they've had a negative encounter with the snake. Whereas if they just watch it and take some pictures with their phone, it'll be a positive encounter. And so I try to encourage them to do that.
Yeah, so unless you really love snakes or you're a devout herper like Dave, and you've been around for a while, then you can pick up the snakes that are going to poop and musk on you.
Well, yeah, I mean, we know we're going to get pooped on and bit, but we're good with it. We don't dislike the snake anymore when that happens.
Yeah. My first coach whip grabbed a hold of my arm and then pissed and shit in it seconds later when it let go. It was quite the move, but it was worth it.
I couldn't imagine that, Dave, a coach whip with that long tail. Because a lot of times when they musk and shit, they kind of usually put their tail through it. Did the coach whip do that? Yeah. It's like 50-foot long tail slithering up and down through its musk and shit to slather all over you.
Spread it up and down your arms. Try to shoot some up into your mouth.
Worst case scenario. Let's see. I want we talked. Let's do something weird because blue beauties. I feel like we talked about any beauty snake here in the past. You have the calico stuff, I believe. Want to talk about the racers? Or you want to talk about the beauties?
You got racers? What kind of racers?
Oh, Barron's racers.
Oh, Barron's. You know what? I just seen some Joel Reap had a pair on his table, and I'm like, man, more people should breed these, especially because they have good-sized clutches. They sell well. They're pretty cool. They're very cool. Yeah, look at these. Look at this.
Yeah. So, yeah, boy, do they sell well. They have just gone ballistic with sales. So the blue ones in particular are pretty popular. The green ones here are beautiful animals. They get impressively large. They are rear-fanged. Mine have never attempted to bite, but boy, do they attempt to get away. Racer they are aptly named. They will, when I open my tub and I'm messing, they will come up out of the edge of the tub and go to the back of the rack in a lightning second. So a lot of my snakes, if I see them, I open their tub, I can get their water bowl or something. With these guys, I have to get a hold of them because if I turn back, they may be gone. They are very fast at getting around, and when you pick them up, they are pretty active initially, but then they'll settle down and you can hold them just like most other colubrids.
So
I had one. Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead, bud.
I was just going to say I had one for a short bit because my cousin Eddie wanted, he raised it to adult, and I had it for a bit, and some girl She wanted it to breed to her male, and I was like, well, I'm not going to get another one of these things. It is in a really long, like 75-gallon aquarium. He gave it to me, and it is really heavy. And anyway, but it had like a little coconut and perch and stuff for to climb into, and it was a really cool snake. It sure did love to eat, and it was a curious snake. It was really cool. I'd handle it sometimes.
Yeah, they're fun. Yeah, and they've got different degrees of this black stripe down their back. That's kind of a cool look.
Yeah, that was really sick.
Yeah.
I think Dave was about to ask about blue to blue phase breedings, but for what is that what you're going to ask, Dave?
Well, I was going to ask just consistency. Like if you have a nice blue and a nice blue, do they typically all come out blue? Are they born more on the green side? They develop it over time?
Okay, I have a theory that I think has proven true with the animals I've worked with. Some people who also work with these have had a differing opinion. But I will say this. I believe that the blue is simply an axanthic green.
Okay.
That it takes away all...
They always come out all blue then.
It takes away all the yellow. So they're not green. And so if you see the chin is cream colored. Yeah. On the green, the chin is yellow. And so if you took a green and you took out all the yellow, it would be blue.
Yeah, yeah.
And so it seems to be, from my experience, the blue seems to be simple recessive. The green's normal, and the blue is simple recessive. And I'm describing it as anery because it's basically removing yellow.
That's the same way with rough greens. I've seen rough greens that are anery or axanthic, and they're that bluish tone instead of the green. Yeah,
axanthic is what did I say anery?
Well, I always mix those up too. It's anery's taking your your red pigment out, your axanthic takes the yellow out. Is that right, Junior?
Yeah, that's correct. And the thing is, the pigment cells that control red and yellow pigment cells though are the same chromatophores, so it can be used interchangeably. Technically, it's the same mutation that you're describing, but when the animal naturally is predominantly more red, like a corn snake, or let's say a fire skink, they're going to say anerythristic because it's predominantly more red pigment cells. And then for something like a ball python, more gold yellow, it's going to be called axanthic. But really, both of them can be used, but you're really, anery is more reserved for, of course, red pigment cells and yellow. But if you notice, these mutations, axanthic / anery, they're controlling the same, it's a mutant, like with the A standing for without. So axanthic, anerythristic, these mutations that deplete the ability to produce these red or yellow pigment cells. If you notice, they're usually, it's not like, oh, it removed red, now the thing's all yellow. Oh, it moved yellow, now the thing's like, it has light red and pinks because there's a minimal amount of red there. It's removing pretty much all of it because you're removing most of the excess. Now, there might be some areas like corn snakes, it's not completely without, anerythrism and axanthism because you can still see sometimes yellows in the cheeks and stuff. So sometimes some pigment remains. Kind of like, look at it as like a T-positive albinism, although that's, again, not the best analogy because if somebody's really watching me, they're like, hey, that's actually tyrosinase and that's an enzyme needed for black, while axanthism and anerythrism is different proteins. And then also their diets can actually, how much keratin they're taking in their diet actually can depict how much yellow and red pigment cells that they produce. But some of that stuff I don't fully understand. Some of that stuff gets pretty complicated, especially when it comes to the diet. So it sounds like I know a lot of what I'm talking about, but I know the basics.
I was very impressed. I was trying to write notes as fast as I could. For me, my bull snakes are axanthic. My gophers are anery, and in my mind of thinking that the anery does not remove the yellow. That's what I thought was going on. That it was removing the red, orange, if you will, but doesn't remove the yellow. Because I've got San Diego gophers will develop the yellow, but the bull snakes will not develop any yellow if they're an anery or if they're an axanthic. But my San Diego gophers will have yellow. If you looked at some of those snows that I had, yellow's very prominent.
Yeah, it's a lot. Yeah, it's a bright lemon yellow. But that's the thing. It's like it's removing like the majority of them. Like, because you could actually see with like anerythristic corns, like my dad selectively line bred them, and then there's also the strawberry where they selectively line bred where they can produce then more reds. And even though there's an anery in there, it's nulling the red, but it's not completely negating it. And then they found a way to line breed those red cells that do come through to keep line breeding the pigment cells that are able to come through more. So you end up with these really, really pink aneries. But some of those really pink aneries, they'd actually get a lot of yellow concentrated real bright on the neck. But it's basically looking at it as almost like a T-pause, like that effect. Like, oh, it's not completely anery or axanthic. And with some of these animals, still shows through. Even the axanthic ball pythons, you sometimes see a little bit of yellow in them. Most of the aneries and axanthics, I think it's because it's a little more complex. They're never really, there's very few where it seems like they're true, like, without yellow red. Because you could look at like a Kenyan Sambo anerythristic. It's like, oh, this thing's black and white. This thing is truly without, any red or yellow pigment. But then you make a snow and the damn thing's yellow and white.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because where the black is, because there's concentration of pigment that you can't see. But, they work in weird ways, too, because then there's, like, xanthic traits that actually could produce more yellow. So some of these genes that are suppressing red and yellow, yeah, it might suppress it, but it might allow some of the yellow pigment cells to still show through. But, or a degree of the pigment cells that control yellows to still show through, while the stronger ones that are producing maybe more intense yellows or more reds might be, nulled. But it's a tough one because, most of these animals that are said axanthic or anerythristic aren't fully missing all their yellows and reds. It always seems to be some that are still able to synthesize some of these pigments that still come through. And then the racers we're talking about, like somebody, and you'll know about this, Glenn, because they mentioned it, and they're probably the least popular, but I know they're rare. There's actually the brown phase racer too. They're like a tannish brown.
Yeah. Yeah, they're least popular because they're super ugly, but they're rare. So people love them. I mean, us kind of people. Yeah, it is interesting how we go for the pretty ones, the interesting ones, the brightly colored ones or whatever, and everybody gets those. You breed them, and then it's like, well, this ugly one that you all overlooked before, now no one in the hobby has it. So now the ugly one is the rare one, and I couldn't believe how many people were just pursuing those ugly brown Barons racers, and some close friends of mine love those things. They're trying to produce them, and I'm like, they're so ugly. But beauty's in the eye of the beholder, etc. Hey, let me show you this picture. So you can see this baby. See the yellow under the neck and chin?
Yeah.
That's pretty easy there. That's it from my experience. Oh, that's my wife. From my experience, that's obviously going to be green, and then
Did it turn blue?
No.
Okay.
Let me show you those are green. Let me show green. That's a blue. Now, even though it's green now, you see under its chin.
Yeah, it's real cream, like you said.
What a difference, huh? And so this guy will turn that sky blue that those adults that you saw were.
So you can tell right away in the babies which is going to be blue and which is going to be green.
Again, this is, in my opinion, in my experience,
gotcha.
Yeah. I've spoken with a very intelligent, but more experienced person with these animals than I am, who says he swears he has some with yellow necks that are green, and then after like a year or two, they turn blue. And my guess is they're turning teal, not really blue. They're turning that bluish. They're turning bluish. That's my guess.
I heard a rumor.
Green tree python's going to do that. Go ahead, Dave.
Oh, I was going to say, I heard a rumor, and at this point I'm about to bury it because I've asked multiple people their opinion. I've never heard this rumor again. But I heard sometimes by adding UVA or B to these guys will actually help increase some of the colors. They get bigger and will bring some blues out of them.
I don't know.
It's dead. I'm never going to bring it up again. This is somebody said this once. I'm never going to. Yeah.
I hear stuff like that, and I'm always suspect of that kind of, we just need to give them natural whatever. And it's like, they're not really in their natural environment. I do get that UVA, UVB light helps certain animals in certain settings. But I think what happens a lot of times is people get a nice light like that, every snake looks better with bright light. And so, so they're putting this nice light on the snake, and over time they begin to really appreciate it more. It might just have to do with the amount of light, not, to their eyes, not that it is impacting the actual look of the snake.
You gotta run an experiment. Have like 10 Barron's racers raised up in racks and 10 with UVB, and then show it to these people that say that, and to ask them to differentiate the 10 that were with UV and the ones that were kept in a rack.
Anyway, yeah,
I'm guessing they won't be able to tell.
You know what? They may be 100% right. I'm wrong about a lot of things, but
they might be. But it'd be weird that that UV would change the way their pigment cells and iridophore structures develop.
Yeah, it's way above my pay grade. I just put snakes in boxes and let them breed and get babies.
No, literally, I've heard that one time from one person. I probably asked 5 or 10 others, and they've never concurred. They never agreed on it. So I think it's just a one-person rumor.
Okay.
Well, the thing is, like what Glen was saying, it's like, when you get anything, like if you take anything out like side, like I take a picture of a hognose outside, especially certain colors, man, they look way more vibrant. The camera makes them look crazier. Sometimes it makes them look too good.
Yep.
And then the thing is you gain that natural UV spectrum refracting off animals that have natural pigment cells and iridophore structures, which refract back light, which, is part of their, basically their structure to show pigment. So when we're looking at them, you're going to see with that natural UV, they're going to look a little better. And like I take a fat tail gecko outside, and I just one run as a kid, he had a regen tail, it was a wild caught fat tail, and you could see like an iridescent light almost sheen on his tail, and it's like, oh, this is really cool. But yeah, it's I've heard it with hognose too. People that keep it with UV and they're like, oh wow, the snake looks better with UV. But then I've heard people too, they have like UV on their hognose, and they have them like in a moist environment, and they still have like egg binding and sometimes other issues. So these things that they're saying, sometimes it's like you got to do a larger group study in comparison. But not saying UV is bad. Snakes though are really good at self-regulating D3 through diet, and it's really evident with keeping them in captivity. When you can keep one for 20 years consistently, reproduce, and not have any metabolic bone disease or any issues with developmental like issues that would be concurrent with a D3 deficiency.
Yeah, they're. I just think we can give them the best environment we can give them, and we can enjoy them, and maybe some of that stuff matters to a smaller degree, but I don't know. You're right. It would be a lot of effort. It would take a lot of testing to find out something that maybe isn't going to make that big of an impact.
Yeah, and you got to do it too, where it's like you have like where you can remove confirmation bias. That's why, like, if you could have different people raising them with UV and different people not UV, then asking other people to try to pick which ones are which, just based on their pigment and their way their scale structure looks. Or maybe you need something like go on a microscopic level to look if the snake's pigment cells or structures of its iridophores changed at all. But
I would argue that if it requires that much, if the difference is that small that it requires all of that to tell the difference, it's probably not worth it. If you can't say to anyone, pick out the 5 that are different, then I don't think it probably makes that big of a difference.
Yeah.
Yeah, beautiful species.
Those are really cool. And the funny thing is, like, they seem to lay big clutches. It's surprising you don't see more of them. I know they're real popular overseas, and that's probably partly why.
That's part of the problem. I can't sell any domestically because people from Asia will give me a ridiculous amount of money for every one I produce.
So, it's a good problem to have.
Yeah, it will. That will obviously change. I mean, that was kind of the bull snake story for the last little bit, and that has changed because now they all have stock that they're breeding, so it's a lot less expensive for them to produce their own than to mess with buying them from here and flying them over. And so
Sure.
I think the same things here. Once they get enough stock that it's worth their while to just produce them locally, they will stop buying these from us.
Because the Mexican Black Kings, I think I've heard of like warehouses in or overseas in Asian markets where they're just only producing that animal over and over again. And, you know, they really inflated the price on a lot of these colubrids we work with. The Asian market really does a lot of heavy lifting in the American market for colubrids.
That is so true. Yeah. I mean, they've really helped it to grow into some sense of prominence, and it stand on its own feet in the sort of the ball python world, where you're walking through and ball pythons are selling for $20,000 each, and the most expensive colubrid in the show is $70. That's changed.
No.
Yeah, now look how now the ball python people are the people with the $70 snakes and the colubrid people.
Yeah. I mean, and there's a lot of old colubrid projects that if you really stuck it out over the years, they gained popularity. Like you said, they came back around again, and they're stronger now and probably selling for more now than they did a decade ago.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Very. I mean, the snakes we started with that I was showing you, the royal diadem rats, those were not that uncommon. In fact, even the 100-flower Mollendorf eyes, those guys were not nearly as uncommon, 10 and 15 years ago than they are today. And so they were selling, for $150 each back in the day. And now they're whatever, 5 times that.
Yeah, and we lose certain projects too. Like I've always been a big fan of the white-sided speckled king snake, and those all went to the German market for years. But Caleb Bell brought some back in. I want to say within the last 5 to 8 years. And outside of her, people getting stock from her, I don't think they exist in the United States.
Yeah, I haven't seen them.
Yeah. What's one of the newer projects you've got into?
I'll go with these guys. I'm hoping.
Oh wow!
Black-headed spotted whip snakes. These guys are pretty fascinating. Let's see if we can get a good. So these guys are a fascinating whip snake. I think they're from Uzbekistan, this particular line. And this is a natural occurring morph. So there are the normals just don't have a black head. Their patterns are slightly different. I have a normal in here too. There it is. So here's a normal, but the black head is naturally occurring. It's not something that we created by inbreeding as pets. So they're just collected, and it's a simple recessive trait. And so that's a normal, and the blackhead's, a pretty interesting looking trait. And so I picked up a trio of these from Johnny Black out of New York, and they're very rare in the U.S. collections. And they finally got big enough to breed, and I bred them. Well, they were about big enough. They tried to breed. My male ended up prolapsing and dying.
What? That's so rare. That sucks that he prolapsed.
Yeah, and so then I had 2 females that were essentially ready to breed, and no male and no source to get a male. And so I contacted Johnny, and he said, "Well, maybe I'll get a male this next year." And so, that's how far off I'm now waiting to breed these guys. So I contacted, I can't think of the guy's name, but he's another guy who posts the pictures of these up somewhat regularly. I think he's in Poland, maybe. And he said, "Yeah, I can send you a pair." So we worked out a deal, and he sent me a yearling male. So I got a yearling male and got a jump start on getting him up to age. But this year is the year that he was big enough to breed. So fingers crossed on getting some eggs out of. I've got a normal and a blackhead females and a blackhead male. So fingers crossed that I get some eggs.
The last picture, that picture he had to zoomed in, you could see the intense iridescence on the head too.
Isn't that wild?
You can see like that emerald, kind of like green and purple. It's like looking at like a type of gemstone. And
Yeah,
that's the thing
I think of it like a patent leather shoes. The shined up black smooth shoe. It's a deep black. They're pretty incredible, and quite a bit obviously quite a bit bigger now than they were in these pictures.
The blackhead phase, is that something that popped up in captivity, or did you say that's something that's naturally occurring in the wild?
Naturally occurring in the wild.
Very cool.
So it looks like a mutation, Dave, that probably popped up, and it probably fared well, and so to reproduce, and there's a decent amount of this wild population of kind of like, there's like melanistic recessive like garter snakes in certain localities. Like in one area in Ohio, there's a bunch of black eastern milk snakes, and it's recessive. And I bet, is this recessive, Glenn?
Yeah, simple recessive trait. Here in California, we've got Pacific gophers up by me that natural occurring stripes that are incomplete dominance, interestingly.
I've heard of spots in the wild for aberrant California king snakes are not uncommon.
Holy cow, yeah, there's a lot of that. There's a lot of different types of aberrancies that are locality specific in California. So, yeah, these are fun snakes, and these have a really neat personality in that they don't hiss, they huff. And so it's not like some snakes, like a bull snake would hiss at you, but it's more like they're exhaling. Indigos sort of do this. They at you. And it's a really interesting little noise. And it seems like less of a threat. Like a bull snake, it's threatening you. With these guys, it just seems excited. It's like a dog wagging its tail. It's like something's happening, and they'll just start hissing. And so it's fun to pull them out, and they're doing that little hiss, and they're fun snakes to play with.
Do they like pulsate when they huff too?
What do you mean?
I'm trying to see, what's it like my beaded lizards, when they hiss or huff, they'll push with their head, or like sometimes they'll just kind of like or even like kind of like with certain snakes when they court, when they get excited, or if they're trying to communicate to one another that, hey, I'm a hognose snake, or they'll twitch. Is it kind of like do they twitch or move their body?
No, they don't really. It's pretty much just they're not making any motion with it.
Okay.
In fact, it's hard. It takes a while to figure out where the sound is coming from because they're not obvious. Yeah, so I'm super excited about maybe getting some of these guys this year. This has been for the reasons I just listed. This has been a passion project that's gotten delayed by multiple years, and so it is. I'm really anxious to try to get this one off the ground.
That's cool.
And it's nice to have.
I've seen them before, but I feel like I've just seen them on your site.
A few people have them now. Johnny Black has them in New York, and then a handful of people have acquired some from Johnny, like I have. And so there's a few out there now.
How big did you say these get?
They're
They look small.
They're young in all these pictures. I don't have that. They're I would say a little longer than a corn snake, but a little thinner.
Okay, interesting.
So they're not giant they're not as big as like an eastern rat or a beauty snake, but they're in between maybe a corn snake and that.
Yeah, the wild type's cool, but the blackhead is 1,000 times cooler.
Oh yeah, no doubt about it. Yeah, that's a horrible picture, but that's a CB70 to give you an idea, and that's still when it was smaller. Yeah, there's several snakes that have grown quite a bit that I'm like, oh, I got to get some adult pictures. They're getting so impressive. Those hypo calico Chinese beauties that I have, those suckers are getting so big and impressive now. I want to get some pictures for scale.
Do you have one of those hypo calico beauties? A picture of one? That sounds pretty unique.
Yeah, they're yeah, I do. They've been described as like giant palmettos.
Oh wow.
So where's my cover? Okay.
Oh yeah, I see a little bit of it.
Yeah, I'm gonna try to get the picture of the two together. So
It's
here's,
nice when the guest knows how to work the computer.
Yeah, this is like, by the way, anybody who's listening, you guys can tell we're looking at pictures, but my God, is this fun. Glenn with all these like really good, clear pictures, all organized. And he can go right and he finds them all. This is like great. I wish I had this for hog nose. So what I do, Glenn, I just look at my pictures. I show them on my phone like this. But
yeah. I saw David doing that in a video. I was like, I hope I don't have to do that.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah, this is so Chinese beauty snake, and you see the normal one, and then the hypo calico. Just such a unique. I mean, I think the beauty snakes are just incredibly beautiful. And then to have such a different, unique, both in color and in pattern, it's just such a cool combo in my mind. But yeah, I did produce some of these. See the blue tongue on these guys?
Yeah. He has like a purplish blue.
Yeah, half blue. These are some babies I produced 2 years ago, and I just got eggs from the calico mom. These are not this year. This was our first breeding, but I got eggs from this girl again about 3 weeks ago.
What do these go for at Calico Beauty?
I don't remember. About $400, $500, I think.
Why don't people buy these instead of the Palmetto corns? I understand the corns, you got the morph combos, but I'm already telling so far, correct me if I'm wrong, these Calico Beauties don't have any bug eye problems.
I've never seen a bug eye problem with these guys. Yeah.
There you go. Everybody should be breeding Calico Beauties instead of Palmetto corns, maybe.
Yeah, they get quite a bit bigger. I mean, the reason people are doing the corns is because they're corns. And
yeah, well, then you get to do all the morph combos
yeah,
too.
they're all about corns.
Then there's that new hyper-melanistic or nearly melanistic recessive corn, and that'll be amazing with Palmetto. That'll be like pretty killer.
Oh, I don't think I've seen it.
There's a guy over in Europe. He wants like 4,500 or 5K for the first ones. I don't know if he started selling them, but they look good. You know, they look like you could see some faint pattern. It's a pretty cool look. It's almost an all black corn, but you can see some faint pattern there. They're nice looking.
Wow, I would guess that's the steal at 5K because
yes,
it'll probably breed like a corn snake.
Yeah.
Was it is that project called Charcoal, or am I confusing that with something else?
Charcoal is the Anery bee corn. I don't know what those guys are calling it.
No, you're right. I'm confusing it.
I don't know what the hell they're calling it. I haven't, you know what? I've seen them post it, and then I haven't heard anything or seen anybody else with them. There's probably some fucking guy in China offering him $500,000, so he's buying them all. So nope, none of us like hobbyists over here that are a little more humble can buy any until the Chinese dude's done spending his $500,000.
Yeah, but it won't be long. It won't be long till they're out, and you know, like the Palmettos that were whatever, 15, 20, 30, 50 grand, whatever they were. And then they were, you know, I remember people going, they're down to $2,000. I'm going to buy it. Well, by the time they get down to $2,000, wait a couple years, and then they're going to be $400. So Palmetto's a beautiful snake, though.
females sat at $4,000 for a while. I feel like every Daytona I'd seen when they were just females, always $4,000, and I want to say that was at least a couple years running.
Yeah,
but then they dropped off.
I think I maybe it's not maybe not associated with what you said, but the idea of the Palmettos, I think Don had those, right? Don and Soderbergh ended up with those.
He
And
did.
knows the backstory on them really well.
Oh, the backstory. I know more, but you know who almost got the first Palmetto corn was my dad. My dad offered it was the guy had it at the South Carolina Reptile Show. He had it in a 10-gallon aquarium with an old metal lid and a rock on the lid, and it was on display. The guy had caught it, and my dad offered him $20,000. I told my dad, but it was my dad's own. We were breeding geckos at the time. My dad had his own corn, so even though it had nothing to do with me, because the corns were his, I was like, man, I wouldn't buy that thing for $20,000. I was like, I don't know if that's going to be genetic. And it's like, you know, obviously,
Yeah.
but my dad offered him $20,000, and then the guy's like, I'm going to keep it and breed it. My dad's like, well, what are you going to keep and breed it to? And the guy said he was mainly just a collector. He didn't really ever breed. I don't know if he bred much or just didn't breed at all. And then the guy's like, I'm going to catch some corns from the same area and breed it to it because they're probably carrying the gene. And my dad's like, how do you know they're going to be carrying the gene? And the guy was like, the spot where I found a corn, he goes, the corns can get in, but they can't get out. And my dad goes, what is it, the Thunderdome, like from Mad Max? And then a few people laughed, and then the guy started not to like my dad after that. And he didn't sell it to him. And then the crazy part is Don Soderbergh bought it like 8 months later for $16,000. So the guy sold it for $4,000 less
Really?
than Don Soderbergh. Yeah. And then what's his name? Jim Godfrey kind of lived near that guy because Jim Godfrey was from the Myrtle Beach area, and he convinced that guy, him and his friend Daryl, to sell it to Don Soderbergh. And then they ended up becoming friends with my dad, and they said they would have told him to sell it to him, but they didn't really know my dad at the time. They had they only met him once, and then years later they became good friends. But then, yeah, Don Soderbergh ended up with it. And then he did something with Travis Whistler. So I know a little bit. I don't know what happened after that, but I was there. I seen it. I was like, man, I was, not super young, but I had to been like 18 or 20 years old. So this was like 18 years or, it would have been like 18 years ago, roughly, when that happened.
Wow. Yeah, I think one of the things Don did, which I, assuming it's all true, and that was that he sold females in the U.S. and shipped males to Europe. And nobody had a pair to compete with him until they outcrossed with something. Did you follow?
I know he sold only female visuals the first year, and I think the following year he sold maybe some hets, but you might be, I don't remember exactly, but I know he did it to, that's like the smart way. You have a recessive, you sell your females first. Especially because, there's always some breeder that's really good at this stuff, and they know how to feed something up really good and try to get it to pair as soon as possible, and then they're going to, try to crank them out.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's eventually going to happen, and there's only so long that you can keep that price up. But certainly, if you put a lot of money into it, it's nice to recoup that money.
I'll be honest. I think like 6 years ago, a guy at I think it was a Colorado show, didn't want to take any of his double, tripling, like quad het Palmettos home. And he pretty much brought them over. And it was like all females. I think he wanted like $15 a piece. So I ended up buying the entire group off him, sold the males as normals, kept a couple I needed, held all the females. And I've been making Palmettos for 3-4 years now, just from that one group and that very small investment.
Yeah.
You can do it the Dave method. You wait till somebody's desperate and they're about to be destitute, and then you swoop in and you get the project.
Yeah. You take advantage of other people's desperation. That's the key.
That's why I can't touch any of these Colubrid projects anymore. They're too expensive. I need them cheap. I need someone desperate.
We're all desperate at some point.
We're all a little desperate. It's funny because I'm waiting for like a Honduran collection to pop up because I really want to expand on Hondurans, and I've got some younger stuff I'm raising up, but like I'm kind of like I just want more now. You guys are talking about Hondurans being a little nippy, a little bit of a pain in the ass. I love all the Honduran stuff.
I love Hondurans too. Actually, I was going to sell my small group of adults, Dave, because I have babies from them. I was going to breed them one more season, but I was like, man, what am I doing? Like, I like Hondurans, but my main focus is hognose snakes, a little bit of leopard geckos, a little bit of beaded lizards, but mostly hognose snakes. And hognose snakes are by far my favorite thing. Nasticus, like, you know, obviously that's what I like. That's my favorite. But I'm like, I have these Hondurans, and I was like, they take some time away from me, and I was like, I could be putting hognose snakes here in this area. Even though I already have like way too many hognose, I also don't have enough at the same time. So I was like, I could move hognose here.
Well,
but
if you're desperate enough, give me a call, buddy.
Yeah, I was about to say that. I'm not that desperate, Dave. So you're not going to get these things.
Well, let's talk. You might be that desperate.
Imagine, we'll talk about it after the show. We'll see how desperate I am. Let's see who's more desperate.
We'll talk. So my
who
landlord
wants to buy
came
them or
over.
who wants to sell them?
Well, I want to buy them, but I'll hold out for the next guy because there's always gonna be another Honduran guy selling his adults. But
mine are nice and they're ready to breed. And you're not gonna find it. You're desperate.
It's probably desperate.
So I'm showing some pictures of Palmetto since we're talking about it.
Yeah, that one's cool looking.
And I don't know, have you guys seen the Palmettos have the things in their eye, the specks?
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
in their eyes.
I don't know if I've noticed that before.
Yeah,
I don't think I have either. Is that on all of them, Glenn?
Not on all of them, but on I have multiples with that, so it's not uncommon.
Okay. Yeah, you got some nice looking palmettos. So far, no bug eyeing. I know it's kind of like Ramdas. Hey, you know what's pretty neat? I don't see too many of them, but do you have any anery palmettos?
No, because I only have outcrossed palmettos, so they don't have any other morph.
They look good. I'll tell you what, just looking at your palmettos, they're just like a awesome looking snake. I love the high white, the grays and the red flecks in them. Like it's really neat.
Yeah, so these red corns, normal looking corns, these are bred, these are a palmetto that's been outcrossed previously, but it's a palmetto visual that was bred to a wild caught, and then I got the babies.
Awesome.
That's cool.
And so these guys are half wild caught. And in fact, the last couple of days, I've got 2 females and a male. And so they both of the females just laid clutches in the last few days. And so they will produce palmetto babies that's genetically half wild caught.
Can you click on somebody just a normal wild caught, like so we can just see these kind of like locale outcross, like yeah, it's a really cool. You know what's the cool thing about corn snakes is when I go to Florida and I find like a beautiful corn snake, it's a really awesome find. I know like value wise it wouldn't be like a very expensive snake, but they're so colorful and pretty. It's really nice. These are just really good looking, just as they are.
Yeah, they're pretty snake and they're pretty average corn snakes. But yeah, they're beautiful.
Yeah. We talked about this, Junior, you talk about how you kind of like the not Colorado phase, I'm sorry, Nebraska phrase, hognose, and like all these different states you used to be able to get them from. I've been thinking the same thing because like I like the Miami phase. We have a Myrtle Beach phase corn snake that is really dark, really cool looking. I wouldn't mind kind of collecting different ones from different counties, different regions. If they look different.
There's some cool corns in Alabama. Somebody found like in northern Alabama is like a hypermelanistic, really dark, like burnt, rusty, orange, blackish corn. I was like, that's really freaking cool. It looks like a normal, like really deep, colorful corn, but with like extra like black like pigment in there.
Yeah. Myrtle Beach phase is really interesting. I'll take a picture of that one. It's a very, very dark corn snake.
Yeah, show me those. Yeah, the hognose, like you got these different states. There's like a gradient of like locales, but masochists, they don't vary like your milk snakes or your like these Lamprepeltis do. But if you look at them long enough, I noticed some of the nuances in them, but some of them are tough. But yeah, these locale corns, it is really cool. And the one thing I found pretty neat too is like, you know how there's isolated populations in Tennessee and Kentucky, and those are kind of different looking too. They're a little, they're considered not as pretty, especially the Kentucky ones, but they're interesting.
So I had my landlord came over with the kids today, and whenever they do, I always open up some containers. And the wife did not really like snakes, but when I opened up the Palmetto, she's like, okay, I absolutely love that snake. So it's a very appealing animal. Like I said, it's one of the probably one of my like top 5 corn snakes.
Yeah, and unfortunately, I was kind of jokingly bashing them about 20 minutes ago when we were looking at those beauties.
Well, I mean, you do bring up a very good point, and that is the bug eyes. I wish people had the, I don't know, courage to call those mutants, or at least to not breed them.
Yeah, don't breed them. Pet onlys. These look good though. Every Palmetto you've shown is like an outstanding example. The colors, the structure, the anatomical structure of the head is like perfect on these.
Yeah, I well, here's the thing. I when I first saw Palmetto, I said, "Oh, I want to get one," and then all the bug eyes started coming out, and I'm like, "No, I will not ever own a Palmetto. I'm not interested. I hate when they end up looking all mutated." And so I was not interested. And then I was at a show years ago down in LA, and there was this perfect Palmetto, and I said, "What's wrong with this Palmetto? Its eyes are normal."
Eh,
And the guy said, "I just have a line that's been outcrossed and it doesn't give me bug eyes." And I said, "I will take it." And so then I raised that one up, and then I started, and my plan was to just breed that one to some other snakes and then bring it back to itself. But I found some other people who had some outcrossed ones as well, so I brought those in to breed with her.
they look really good.
2 things. One, it's very rare I see it in a female where you have any of the eye bulging. It's typically been only in my male stock. And this could have been a fluke, and I'm going to have to repeat it. But the problem is I'm in different conditions this year. But last year, the room that they incubated in fluctuated a good bit because it was just like my baby room for ball pythons and boas. So I would get temperatures like in the mid 60s, or like, I'm sorry, mid 70s, like 76. Some days it was 82, but honestly, it was a little more on the low side, in my opinion. I got no eye bulging this year, maybe one snake out of quite a few, where the previous 2 years with the exact same stock, I was getting heavy eye bulging.
And you're saying because of the variation or the coolness, or maybe both or either?
It was the only thing that was different between one season to the other was the inconsistent temperatures and honestly being a little more on the low side. Where the year beforehand, I just took them out to like the building where we did an ambient of 82 degrees for the ball pythons, and we just had them on top of those racks a lot of times. Where the other time we kept the eggs in the house, in the baby room, for some colubrids and for some other animals, and temperature again being a house temp, the air would kick on, it would fluctuate a little bit. Sun would hit the room a little differently, but honestly, I think it was in the mid 70s most of the way through. And I think I was talking to Tim Bailey, and he said that he's keeping his palmetto eggs lower in the room for incubation, so it's a little cooler to see what happens. I'll have to replicate it this year, but what I'll do is I have half my eggs in front of the building. I'll put the other half in the back, and we'll see who ends up the most fucked.
Yeah,
That's good. Awesome. I like that experiment.
Please let us hear about it.
One thing is, though, I got to get going. The show's kind of closing for the pre-setup. So if you guys want to continue talking.
I got 4.5 hours to drive tonight, so we can wrap it.
I got to get going, unfortunately.
Okay, well,
you didn't want to go for 2 hours, Glenn, so we are going to cut it at 1 hour and 53 minutes.
Well, Glenn was like, I don't know if we'll have enough time. I was like, man, I feel like, Glenn, we could have talked easily for another hour. And I wanted to talk about, you have a lot of cool snakes.
We haven't even touched on the Peruvian calico snakes or the velvet swamp snakes. Those are pretty. I got stories to tell you about my Leonis. That would be a good. So have me back again.
If I could segue in there. So, Junior, you're going to talk. You're taking a little break, you said, right?
Yeah, I'm going to take a break for about 4 weeks. I'm working on some other stuff, and I'm going to go out on some herping trips. But, yeah, I'm going to be gone for about the 2 next podcasts, trying to get caught up in other stuff.
Yeah, I'm going to got you those couple weeks. I'm going to line some stuff up. I might even bring in Colubrid guys because it's supposed to be a Colubrid show. But
yeah, right.
When you come back in a month and a half, you want to do a second half with Glenn and talk a little more of these other species?
Definitely. This was a lot of fun. I like talking to Glenn a lot. Cool dude. You got some cool projects. I like your, perspective on keeping and breeding. So this is great. So we definitely have to do a part 2. We got almost 2 hours in. We're probably going to do another 2 hours next time, I'd imagine, maybe even more. But we'll see. I didn't know you had this much stuff. And the crazy cool thing is you got this really good like portfolio of pictures. So this is a lot of fun for a lot of people. Are like, oh, we like to listen in. I'm like, this is one where, because a lot of times you gotta, if you're just watching, it's just us sitting around talking. It's like, you could just listen. This one is more interactive. You could actually be watching this one because you had so many cool example photos. And not only that, they're good photos. These are like professional looking photos. They're not like on your like phone, just quickly taken.
Yeah, that's another thing I talk about sometimes. Is just kind of a simple way to get high quality photos. Because I've kind of worked on that a little bit in the hobby as well. I know some people a lot of people take photos that I'm very jealous of, but I know they're setting up studio lighting and doing all sorts of things. I'm snapping off hundreds of pictures to put things on Morph Market and throw them up on Facebook. And so I'm taking a lot of very quick photos, and I've learned a few tricks that kind of give you a consistently better sort of representation of what the snake really looks like, which I would love to see more and more of as we try to buy them based on pictures.
Yeah, you did a good job. You definitely did a good job. The pictures look really good.
Thanks.
And then thanks again. I'm going to get going. So that's the show. We're kind of ending it somewhat abruptly. Thanks again, Glenn, for your time and information. And again, all the awesome photos. We're going to have Glenn on again because he keeps so many interesting colubrids and he's paying attention to their behaviors. And this is like really good stuff when we get some feedback. Oh, I've noticed this. I've learned this. And plus, he's showing us stuff that we've never even seen before. These black-headed whip snakes from, I don't know, some weird European country like Uzbekistan. Was it Uzbekistan?
I believe so, yeah.
Yeah, cool stuff. And that's like one thing I like about the hobby, even though I'm just like really a Nastigas guy. Of course, I appreciate all reptiles, and learning and seeing these things is pretty cool. And so thanks again, Dave. There was a chance I wasn't going to show up. Most likely, it seemed like I wasn't going to be able to show up, and that's why Dave dressed basically as me. He has my shirt, and he has like Eastern hognose in the background. And so actually, after I seen that, people were even saying like, "Cool background, Dave." I was like, "Man, I gotta get a green screen and do that." So, thanks again, guys. It's been fun.
My pleasure. Thank you, gentlemen.
Yeah, thank you again. See you, everybody.
Thank you, Glenn. Honestly, appreciate that.
My pleasure.
Thanks, Dave.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Like and subscribe.
Like and subscribe. Follow us on Instagram. Glen Reptiles on Instagram.
Yep.
Me, JMG, Dave Custom Scales. Follow us on Instagram. Subscribe. You'll be seeing more of this, and this is just a lot of fun to do. So hang around, and I'll have some news when I'm back in about 4 to 6 weeks too. So see you, everybody.